Welcome to the BOACast. If you're watching this, you have stumbled across a discussion about one of the articles I am writing for Substack. Thought, faith, and belief, and how my definitions of these three words have completely changed the way that I think about the world and I think about these topics. These are not the dictionary definitions. These are my internal working definitions. Should be fun. I have today with me producer Duke, also known as Luke.
Hello. Pleasure to be here.
Mm-hmm. We already had a little bit of a conversation about this. Mm-hmm. It got interesting and spicy. Not that spicy. Midwest spicy.
Caliente.
Caliente. Midwest spicy conversation about thought, faith, and belief.
Just a mild barbecue.
Mild barbecue. I like that.
Mild barbecue sauce.
Yeah. Well, and I have been working on this piece, and I'm excited to put it out for the particularly analytical people out there. I tend towards the analytical. Mm-hmm. I think you also tend towards the analytical. Would you characterize yourself that way?
I think so.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, one of the things that I had to come to grips with as I came into my adulthood, and I didn't figure this out in high school as a teenager, would have been a great unlock. But one of the things I had to come to grips with was, oh, hey, I distrust my emotions pretty severely. And yeah. Because I distrust my emotions, I discount emotions and I discount other people when they're emotional. And that has some upsides, but it also has some serious
downside. Last one in particular can
get
complicated.
Yeah. And I'm not sure exactly where that came from. That was probably like a parenting thing that got conveyed to me in a way that wasn't intended, or maybe how it was intended for that point in my development. But I definitely absorbed the you aren't yourself when you're angry. And it's really easy to say things you don't mean when you're angry. Mm-hmm. Be careful, which I took as don't take people seriously when they're angry. They probably don't mean it. They're probably just lashing out. And so that was an interesting thing for me coming into adulthood and figuring out how to navigate that. So I distrust my emotions first, and that doesn't mean I don't act emotionally. I still believe in the man steering the elephant sort of theory of you are an emotional being who does things for emotional reasons, and then you rationalize them later. I still believe that.
Yeah.
And my default is, whoa, I don't feel good about this. Take a step back, don't make a decision right away, and think. Do you see that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was curious if you feel like you grew up in a home where that was an implicit or explicit lesson from your parents.
Yes. I think there were some explicit lessons there around.
Where they said that to you in those words, basically, that you were just saying?
I think I twisted it. I think I got the message. I think the intention of the message was, hey, be careful when you're angry because you can say things you can't take back.
Yeah. And
then I twisted that in my childhood mind into what I made it into.
Well, I can see very easily how if you were to look at someone like a child, especially, say, sorry, I didn't mean that. I was just angry. Mm-hmm. It would be very easy to internalize that as when you are angry, the things you say aren't what you mean. Mm-hmm. Like that's very easy. You almost could say that's the correct interpretation of that, even though it's not how the parent means it. Mm-hmm. If you look at that sentence objectively, that does seem to be what you're saying. So I could see that being something that could really muddy the waters in that way.
Yeah. I think it's I twisted it when I generalized it and overused it. It wasn't that it was a bad lesson. It was that I generalized it and overused it. And then I generalized it and overused it with adults too, where when people would get angry, I would hear what they had to say, but then come back and look for confirmation later.
Right.
And sometimes that made the situation worse because I wasn't taking them seriously in their most angry and most honest, which isn't true. That was a weird thing for me to find out too, is that some people are most honest when they're emotional, and that when they get to that point of anger or that point of frustration, and they let something out, that's something they've been holding on to, and it is more serious, and I should treat it more seriously instead of less seriously. So that was an early 20s thing. Fascinating how, as a child, I had a good lesson, and then I took it and generalized it in a weird way.
Right. Well, I guess the question with that for me is, what's the solution? Because people do say things they don't mean when they're angry, or that they feel. They put words to their feelings, which feelings are not. I always say feelings are real, but they're not reality. They are a real thing you're experiencing in that moment, but they do not necessarily correlate to what the truth is.
Right.
And so, yes, sometimes when you speak more honestly, but sometimes even that honesty is ill-advised or a mistake to be honest about that thing, because it's just damaging. It doesn't benefit anyone. I think the truth is a valuable thing, but I don't think that it is always the right thing to be truthful in all circumstances. I mean, there's the gray areas of like white lies and things like that, but there are things that are true that just don't need to be said.
Yeah. Well, you're jumping ahead at this point.
Of course.
Yeah. That's the section, that's later on. I talk about dissonance. But yeah, so I don't know. That was an interesting thing for me is finding out, hey, when people are really upset, sometimes they say the most true thing, and you need to be there for that. You need to hear it, and then figure out how you respond. So
sometimes they're saying something true, but they're not saying it correctly.
Sure.
They're speaking from some real experience or pain, but maybe they're still processing that feeling, and they aren't really sure. Like if you're upset about something and they'll say, oh, whenever you do this, it makes me so mad or whatever. But like the truth below that is maybe my dad used to do that, something like that to me. And when you do it, it makes me feel small, and it makes me feel like unimportant the same way it did when my dad did that. And so the argument is not the argument. It's another thing below that, but they don't necessarily even know that. They're being honest and truthful about where they are in their own processing of that experience, but they're maybe not to the core of it yet.
Yeah.
And so that truth doesn't necessarily even helpful in that moment.
Yeah.
Because it can lead your partner or your friend or whoever in the wrong direction. They're like, oh, okay, so you're upset about this. It's like, no, what's really the problem beneath this and probably 10 other arguments is this core little hurt child deep in your recesses of your mind.
Yep.
But then we're getting into
we'll get to that too. So just for, I guess, for the sake of introduction, I want to talk about my internal definitions of the words thought or thinking, faith, and belief, and how I use those when I'm being careful. I think there's times where you're not careful as well, but when I'm being careful, how do I use these words and how do I conceptualize them? Again, these are not dictionary definitions. These are the definitions that I use that give me the most explanatory power around human behavior and understanding how I think, and also to an extent how others think as well. And I've found that there are some key things, some like big unlocks that you can discover as you go through your life experience. And these three words, like nuancing these three words through, has been a really big unlock in how I view the world. For an analytical person, that may be true for you as well. For a less analytical person, you just might understand more about how some of the more, the people that you know, they're in their head, how they approach life by watching this conversation. So, very high level, I'll say that thinking describes what is, faith describes what should or ought be, and belief describes so what. But let's hit these three kind of in order here and in the order that I mentioned them. It'll be easy to get lost in any one of these words, but hopefully we can have a productive conversation here. So thinking. I associate thinking with analysis, consideration, fact-finding, problem-solving.
And Rodin. Is that the artist, the thinker?
I don't get the reference.
The thinker, the statue.
I see. I get it. Yeah. So for me, thinking is a really high standard. And I try, instead of saying, I think, when I'm reacting to something, I say my gut reaction, or I feel like. I try not to say I think, because your immediate reaction is almost never thinking. It's almost always emotional.
That's true.
What's your gut reaction to that?
No, it's a complicated. I mean, that's a good point because we do say like, "Oh, I think this" or "I think that," and oftentimes it's what feels right to you. Right.
Yeah. And so differentiating thinking from I'm reacting to a stimulus, or I have a gut feeling, or my ego says, being able to piece those things apart and identify that in yourself is really good. But again, in my conception of this word, thinking is a pretty high standard. And quality thinking requires you to understand your base assumptions, at least to some extent, and the system you're working within as you think. So when I define it in that way, when I say, thinking is a really high standard, I think we can all say, most of the time I'm not thinking. Most of the time I'm reacting, or I'm executing on a plan, or I'm feeling my way through something, or,
right.
Well,
then,
yeah. Go ahead.
On that note, because you say you have to understand your base assumptions and things to allow yourself to think within a scope large enough to really be considered thinking. You have to have at least a certain understanding.
Well, that's something I mentioned in the article too, is that thinking usually it's a high standard and it's narrow. It's pretty rare for people to think in a broad sense and actually be successful in that. It's messy.
My question for you in that is it possible to be purely logical and analytical and pure thinking where emotion doesn't enter into it, and where I would argue it's not even possible to really separate emotion out of it completely for humans as we are. Maybe Vulcans and like hypothetical species or whatever, we can talk about that. But like for human beings, are we ever able to fully separate the emotion, and how much knowledge do we have to have of our own background, our own motivation, our own deep hurts, our own aspirations, our own theological or religious understanding, worldview that comes into all of these things that affect the way we think. We cannot, I don't think we have the mental capacity to fully account for all of the factors that would be, we are a complex system as beings.
Yeah, so to reflect back to you, what I think I just heard you ask me is, David, can you make a case for someone being able to, through thought and understanding of themselves, deep understanding of themselves, remove their ego and their emotions from a large set of their decisions?
Well, to some extent, yes. I guess to the core of what I'm asking is it theoretically possible to reach like what we might call pure thinking?
Narrowly.
Because you say like, oh, it's a high standard to be thought. And I agree, because a lot of what we think we're thinking is, like you said, slogans, propaganda, things that we have heard other people say, and we're just taking a couple pieces and putting it together.
Yeah.
To some extent, that is what thinking is.
To some extent, and that's where we'll get a little further on.
Right.
I think.
It's just perhaps more refined, and more aware. But is it possible to have pure thinking that is separated from, for a shorthand from our humanity, I guess, because of the things that make us, in a lot of ways, those are the things that make us human, is our emotion, our ego, our limited capacity to understand the full scope of the world. Mm-hmm. Our brains are finite to some degree.
Well, there are entire disciplines based around how do we get as objective as possible. Mm-hmm. There are entire disciplines built around that. And what is objectivity? Defining objectivity in the first place too is a big mess.
How do you objectively define objectivity?
So here's an example, right? The scientific method is a structured way of disproving a hypothesis.
Sure.
Right? So you make a guess based on the information you have and the assumptions you have about the world, the way things work as best as you understand them. There's a lot of assumptions that get baked into that hypothesis. And what you do in the scientific method, in a good study, is that you put in as many controls as you can to remove human bias.
Yep.
Right? So I'm not talking about a correlation study of large data here. I'm talking about
direct testing of things.
Right. So what we try to do in the scientific method is we remove as much bias as we can in these double-blind studies where the people doing the studying don't even know which person they're interacting with, whether they're on the left or right side of the study, or A or B.
It sounds like you're talking about like a social study.
Yeah, I'm not talking.
That point.
No. When I'm okay, left or right, you heard political. I don't mean.
No,
that.
I don't mean. No, I mean you're studying humans and their behavior at that point. If you're not testing chemicals in a lab. If you're talking about which people are in which group.
Yeah, but you can be testing the way human beings react to those chemicals and be doing a double-blind controlled study.
Like medical testing or something.
Correct.
Like that. But there's scientific testing that has nothing to do with living beings.
Absolutely.
There's plenty of that.
That too. But the caution that we have to introduce here too is, where exactly are all of our biases, right?
Well, that's the challenge of applying a scientific method to humanity and living creatures, is that you are adding an astronomical amount of difficult to control for, or impossible to control for, or things that we're not even aware of. There's so many things within the human body that we don't really fully understand.
Right. Let's stay narrow though. My point was, we use double-blind studies where the person who's cataloging the data for the study doesn't even know
of course,
what the state of the thing or person they're studying is prior to the observation.
Which is the attempt to take bias out, yes.
Correct. So the scientific method is like a whole approach where we say remove human bias. These people who are doing the study, they have a hypothesis already. Mm-hmm. So we're going to set them aside and we're going to hire different people. And then these different people aren't going to be told
what they're testing for, yes.
Exactly what they're testing for. They're going to be instructed to take measurements. And then those measurements are as objective data as we can possibly get. Excuse me. We've removed as much bias as we can, and now we have some relatively reliable data. And with that relatively reliable data, we can think. I'm not saying we're doing thinking to get that data.
You're skipping the most important part of that test.
Oh, say more.
Of the scientific method is the repeatability, because that section of the scientific method is specifically for what factors did we not anticipate and could not control for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because we tested it and we think that this is a cause and effect relationship, but it could, when you do it again, it doesn't come out with the same results. Then there's factors that we didn't account for.
Sure.
And I think that is one of the big problems, the replication crisis that we have now in a lot of our scientific work demonstrates that we are either still allowing too much bias into our interpretation of the data, or that we are adding into such complex systems that we are not even remotely close to covering all the controls that we need to be able to control.
Right. But I'm not here to talk about a replication of studies in a psychological basis. I'm just using the scientific method as an example of, we recognize that human beings have bias, right? You asked, can we remove all emotion and bias and all that? I think no. I think narrowly, maybe. Narrowly, yes. We can remove it within a specific piece of data or within a specific discipline. Sometimes we can remove much of the bias. We can create
data that is unbiased, but the human beings themselves still have to think with their own biases.
Right. Exactly. And so that's, you're always going to have interpretation that will have some level of bias in the interpretation, but being able to create as unbiased data as possible that then hands off to multiple people, and multiple people can look at that data and go, oh, I see this data and I come to this conclusion, and somebody else sees this data and comes to a different conclusion, but we're working from the same place. And that helps us also back into, well, wait, what pre-existing assumptions or what methodology causes you to come to a different conclusion than me, because we know that we agree on this one piece, right? So anyway,
and that's where further testing also enters into it, because you're like, okay, well, if it's this, then if we control for this, that will demonstrate that there was that it's that.
Correct.
And then you end up with a third result that's completely, so neither of them were correct.
Yeah. But again, the scientific method as
an
example.
Little gnomes all along.
Yeah. It was little gnomes all along. Sheesh. Anyway, I'm just using the scientific method as an example of removing bias, right? That's it. So in terms of thinking, how do we remove bias and what data do we use as our inputs, the scientific method generates reasonably unbiased data when done properly, and can be a great input for our thinking that helps us remove some of our bias. And I would say too, again, when my conceptualization of thinking, I keep couching this, because thinking is hard, most people are way better off to say, who's been successful at this? Let me copy what they're doing. Or what tools or processes exist to do something like this? And then you grab from multiple sources and you combine them together to create your own, where you're doing a combination of working functions that leads you in a good direction, instead of attempting to create something through thought on your own.
Right.
And usually that requires specific knowledge about the topic at hand, right? So somebody who is not in a discipline, not in an industry, they lack the context to really think. They can identify problems probably, but they probably can't create new ideas through thought in the way that I conceptualize it without having any experience in the field, because you are blind to so many different assumptions about how things should go.
Right.
So I would say you have, most folks take the existing stuff, run with it, use that to learn the discipline, then take other things that work in that area, combine them together, make something new with the combined ideas. That's another level of thought. And then I would put educators, and what I mean by this is, popularizers, or people who make edutainment content, or people who teach new folks in the field, whatever. But when you have to teach a thing, you usually have to understand it pretty well. I don't mean educators in terms of people in an education system. That's another discussion. Right. But people who educate on the topic typically have to have a little bit better thought about that topic, because they have to figure out how to simplify and where you can simplify and how to convey those ideas to other people. So I think creating education about something is another layer of thought. And then you have people that are generating the best ideas in this space. And the people who are generating the best ideas in this space are usually the most experienced disciplined thinkers in that space. And again, thinking in my conceptualization is narrow And one of the benefits of using this definition of thinking for me is to push back against what we talked about in the opening. I analyze and overanalyze and think and ruminate about different topics. I spend a lot of time doing that. And sometimes I assume other people's brains work like mine, or sometimes I assume I'm thinking when I'm not. I'm just rolling over the same ideas or taking somebody else's ideas and just ingesting those, right? And going over those same ideas over and over again versus thinking about something new or really pushing the boundaries of creating new ideas. And so part of using thinking in this way, for me personally, is to keep myself humble, setting that high standard for I am going to sit down and really think about this problem and really go to the edges of it and play with what do I expect is going to happen if I start playing with the edge? And then am I correct? And then revise my model of the world because I didn't predict the future properly. And some of this you can do by predicting the past. If this was true, what would have happened? That's not what happened. What assumption do I have wrong? And then there's a lot of fun play with that there.
Well, that's something that'd be worth a further discussion right there. Just discussing our past as experimentation.
Yeah. That's a difficult thing to do too, because isolating factors is challenging.
It is. And it's easy to bring bias into it because you're like, oh, my parents didn't do this, therefore they don't love me. Or they didn't love me. Like, you can really go, like, if they loved me, they wouldn't do this. Like,
I need to get you a jump to conclusions, Matt.
Well, I'm just saying that this is the danger of analyzing your own past for what lessons can I take away from those things, because there's assumptions and jumps on your own part. I think especially when it comes to evaluating how our parents raised us, if you are not a parent yourself, there's a lot of things that bring new perspective as you go through those things yourself on the other side. And you're raising a child that's not you, but it's still like a similar kind of, you understand what I mean?
Yep. You could say the nuances aren't readily apparent.
Yes. If you were a dad, you can say that. Otherwise, no. But like my brother, for instance, he had this big revelation at one point after being a dad for many years. It wasn't even like the moment his first child was born. This is like after his third child sometime, like a year or two ago. And it occurred to him, oh, mom must feel this way that I feel about my girls about us. Like it never occurred to him, like, oh, my parents love me and my siblings the way I love my children. And it just like never. He went to Wheaton. Like, he's a smart guy. Like, it just completely never occurred to him. And honestly, there might be maybe someone listening right now who's like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Like, it takes contemplation. It takes putting yourself outside of yourself.
Yes.
To see the world that way, I think, to reach those conclusions, to come to those ideas, to recognize it's what I'm feeling isn't a new feeling that's never been felt on earth. And the fear I feel about not being able to make the mortgage, I fear not being able to put food on the table, or losing my job, or the stresses at work and then trying to balance that so I don't bring it home. Conflict at work and not bringing that conflict and dumping it on my wife or my kids. Like, those are all things that when you're a kid, you experience the one side of it, but you didn't experience where it's coming from.
Yep.
And getting that perspective can be so important and critical to understanding what your parents were dealing with.
Yeah.
And what they were going through. And again, it's I saw this thing recently that was the humanization of your parents, or something like that is how they refer to it. The older and older you get, the more your parents become people and not just this concept of mom and dad.
Yeah.
They still are that. They still are your mom and dad to a large degree, I would say. I think you probably think of them a little differently. But recognizing them and looking at them through the lens that you view your friends through, for instance, or yourself or your spouse.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more grace and generosity a lot of times that we have for our friends than we would share towards our parents.
Yeah.
And they're doing and that's a whole nother conversation. Are they doing the best they can or not? But I would tend towards your parents are doing the best they can.
Right.
They have their own set of ego damage, psychological issues, sometimes, honestly, mental illness things that are not always under their control. But that's a whole nother can of worms to get into all that. But
Well, and for more thought on that topic, you can check out my piece on Substack about You Are Not the Main Character, where I talk about just this, right? One of the ways to improve the way that you think about the world and to be a better person is to understand the role you play in somebody else's story in which they're the main character, right? And your parents are a great one to analyze. Also, for better understanding on this topic, go check out Ho-Math's video on levels of consciousness. Little weird to plug that, a channel called Ho-Math, but he does a really, really good job of explaining development of your consciousness and your ability to understand what's going on, because that is part of what goes on. Our life experience combined with improving our understanding of human consciousness as we grow older allows us to have true empathy for the experience of others. It's a fascinating model. He's using a model, again, this is where he's being an educator, where he didn't create this model, but he is simplifying it and making it much more understandable for the masses, where they can look at that and go, oh, okay, so most of the time, this is how I show up in the world, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time I'm at this level of consciousness, and then occasionally I sit down and go into deep thought about other people in society, and I come to this different conclusion based on the fact that I've humanized others more. So it's also fascinating because he talks about sometimes improving your consciousness level actually doesn't improve how you show up in the world.
Yeah.
He said usually it does, but sometimes it doesn't. That's a whole nother thing. But let's
for more on that topic, you can also get married and have kids and raise them.
In a wise, careful way.
It's a little bit more involved. We recommend those videos first.
Mm-hmm. All right. So anyway, we've talked about thinking, and again, the short version, which is really incomplete, but the short version is that thinking at its best describes what is. You can use thinking to predict the future in a narrow way, because you understand the world and you can come to those conclusions. Faith. Again, I mentioned faith is more about what ought be or what should be. So faith is accepting a family or a system of ideas. Faith is a much lower standard to me than thought, intriguingly. And taking something on faith is incredibly useful because you don't have enough time, you might not have the mental horsepower, you might not have all of these other resources in order to build your own system of beliefs from whole cloth. Nobody really does that. And I did use
system. Even if they try, there's been so many people who've been coming up with ideas for thousands of years, it'd be very difficult to avoid them.
Right. So anyway, and I did right there, you can see faith developed their own system of beliefs. I'm differentiating a little bit here, but faith is a family of ideas or a system of ideas. And some people will hear faith and they'll immediately go, oh, you mean religion? No. So when you learn from your parents, right, you're taking on faith that they know what they're talking about and that they're providing you a functional system of ideas, right? I say here, I had faith. My parents knew how to live, so I could emulate them. In business, you have faith that certain methods, techniques, KPIs will lead you to a result.
Mm-hmm.
And so you approach those, you teach those, you bring those into the office space and expect that of other people that you work with as well. Entrepreneurship in particular requires incredible faith, because you have to have a system of ideas about your ability to succeed, often in direct contradiction to observable information, right?
Right.
They have to push through, hey, if I think about this in an objective way, everything's stacked against me. If I look at the data that's coming out of our business, we're losing money and I don't have clarity around what exactly is going to turn this.
Mm-hmm.
But I have faith that if I continue to pursue it, if I continue to put effort in these areas, if we do this thing that I believe is really important and people want it, I don't have data to justify that this is true, but if we go this direction, it will be successful because I know something that others don't yet.
Right.
Entrepreneurship is
entrepreneurship, I feel like, and spoiling where we're going with this, but your conception of faith and your conception of belief and the differences between them, they really merge uniquely, I feel like, in entrepreneurship or things like that, where yes, that's the idea that keeps you moving forward, but you also are actively acting out that faith in the form of belief, because it's not a hypothetical business that you're starting. It's a real business. So like your action has to follow through on that faith every moment. And you're saying the numbers are not adding up in real time, but I still have faith and I'm going to act on that faith by continuing to do this business this way. And so like there's sometimes where faith and belief can be more separated in your life, or I have this faith, but I'm not acting on it.
We'll get there too.
But like, I feel like they're intrinsically tied together in something like that, where like you can have faith that this idea can work, but you're not an entrepreneur.
Right.
If you're not doing it, if you're not actively pursuing it or being the business.
Right.
In that moment, it's just an idea.
Yeah.
So
you're in my conception of the word faith, and again, I keep couching it, probably very annoying to watch. In my conception of the word faith, your family has a faith system. Your business has a faith system. If you're religious, you have a faith system. If you're an atheist, you have a faith system. If you're a scientist, you have a faith system. And that faith system, there's lots of them that overlap. In politics, you have a faith system, right? If we do X, Y, Z, then we will get X, Y, Z result. That's a faith system. So it's tied deeply into culture. Our whole economic system is a faith system, but that's a whole nother.
Especially when we switched over to fiat. But.
Yeah. Anyway, but faith is
switching to fiat is when it became a belief system.
Yeah. Faith is often our defining should or ought, right? So, and having that system of ideas, having those things in mind as these are all of the things I believe, even though I haven't evaluated all of them, we see that show up a lot of times, right? And that's where we do get into belief. So, belief is the so what or the what now, right? Here's where this one comes from. And I think belief, my conception of the word belief, is going to be the most confusing to folks at the outset. So let me be careful about how I explain it. In English, the word belief is really, it's used very flexibly. I use the definition that belief is a combination of ideas and action. When you believe something is true, you behave as if it is true. And often that behavior is subconscious. You don't even realize it. So your belief can be innate, something like, I want to live. And we talked about that briefly, where essentially somebody can be in an extreme situation, and then all of a sudden that I want to live comes rushing up, and it changes their behavior, right? Beliefs can be ingrained or taught by your life experiences. One example, I came into this room and I sat on this chair fully believing I wouldn't fall to or through the floor, right? That is a belief. Beliefs can also be when faith turns into action, right? So in some cases, when you're changing your beliefs, you have to accept something on faith first, and then there's friction before that faith becomes a belief. And somebody can verbally attest to a faith system, right? And then not follow through on it. And they're not following through on it because of dissonance, which I'll talk to in a little bit. So, as an example of this, if you learn about the conservation of momentum in class at school, in your science class, right? You're accepting that on faith from your teacher, right? My teacher knows the ways, that these ideas are correct. But if you go out on the playground and you hold a swing up to your face and let go to see if it hits you in the face, that faith has turned into belief. You're acting it out. You're observing that it works. And that's why I say that your belief is kind of your so what.
So in that example, is the belief saying, I believe my teacher, I'm going to let this go because I believe that won't hit me in the face? Or is it when it comes back and doesn't hit you in the face that you would say that constitutes belief?
Belief is the action of acting out the faith.
Okay.
So grabbing the swing and holding up to your faith. Oh boy.
I'm holding up to my faith.
Yeah.
The swing hit me in the faith.
Yeah. Well, that's why everyone that Mike Tyson fights becomes an atheist, because he punches them right in the faith.
Knocks their faith right off.
Terrible. That's terrible. I love that joke, though. That is not a me original. I don't know where it came from.
Probably Mike Tyson.
So it's possible. So the act of saying, I have enough faith in this idea that when I put it into practice, I will not be punished by it. That's the belief. Now, your belief can be incorrect. So when you act something out, sometimes it doesn't work.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, then my question would be, because I do feel like I agree with you that that's the step of faith. And if it hits you in the face, then you're like, oh, I was wrong to believe that. But when it doesn't hit you in the face, I feel like that solidifies the belief in a way that's different than before it was tested. Mm-hmm. So would you consider there to be tiers of belief, of like observation and experience, cementing that belief even further, to where if you do this, say the swing experience, he does it 80 times, and then one time it hits him in the face, does that negate all the other times? Like how, like, you know what I mean? Like as the more he does it over and over and lives it out, his belief becomes more and more cemented, to where contrary information or data now is easier to reject because he has this experience like, no, but it worked and it worked and worked and worked. So even if it doesn't one time, that doesn't change my belief.
Yeah.
That it's still, do you know what I mean? Like there's different layers of belief. I don't know how you would quantify that, or.
There is a hierarchy of belief, and you will, when you start thinking about, again, I shouldn't drink bubbly beverages while I'm on microphone.
Is that a belief that you have?
That's a faith I have. But I'm a hypocrite. So,
I mean, there's a whole other can of worms. What happens when you have a faith and you actively choose to go against that belief?
Stick with me. Yes, you do have a hierarchy of belief. You might not even be aware that you have competing beliefs. and that those things, because some of your beliefs are subconscious. Some of your beliefs do come from deeply held assumptions or life experience that you don't even remember. And running up against two competing beliefs is really challenging. So as I was writing about this, I wrote about dissonance. So our experiences can shake the way that we think, our thinking, our faith, and our belief. It's possible for you to think something and then fail to act it out. It's very possible, very frequent, that people adopt a faith system and then fail to act that faith system out, right? There are a lot of people that believe if I am kind to people, that will lead to a better result. They have that faith built into them. And that doesn't mean that they're always kind to people. They don't always exhibit that belief because they might have something competing within them, a selfishness or a sense of justice or something else where they say, no, this is unfair. I don't have to be kind to you, right? And those competing beliefs, when you have faith that competes with an underlying belief, it becomes really difficult for that faith to become belief, because as you start to act out the faith, the other belief comes screaming up and you have dissonance within yourself. And that is painful for people to identify within themselves, right?
Well, dissonance is one of the leading causes of mental pain that people have to find. It's one of the things in life you cannot ignore.
Yeah.
You can put it away. You can decide, I don't want to think about this. You can take shortcuts in your thinking to not have to feel that, but you cannot exist feeling that dissonance. If it continues to persist, if your ways of putting it away or convincing yourself it's okay do not work, it will haunt you in a way that nothing really in life does.
Right.
I think in a lot of ways that dissonance is what led to the abolition of slavery in the West, is these people who held to a Christian belief that men are created equal, that we all are made in the image of God, and then that created dissonance with them in them when they saw how we treated our fellow human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And that dissonance built to such a degree that they could no longer say it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Even though everyone in the world says it's okay, even though it's been practiced for thousands of years, even though maybe you were even raised, maybe you owned a slave at one point, but the dissonance is what causes that to collapse ultimately. Is that you cannot justify these two competing beliefs and the reality that you see around you with those things.
Yeah. It's definitely...
It's an incredibly powerful force, dissonance in your mind.
Yeah, that's a broad example, and it's a good one, right? It's a very good one. So, yeah. So, I mentioned here that there's kind of two tragedies that can cause major dissonance. And one of them is when you discover that a deeply held belief does not work. That one can be really, really difficult for people. And then a second one is discovering that your chosen beliefs, your faith that you've converted into a belief, actively conflicts with stronger subconscious beliefs. There is something in you, ingrained in you, that is stronger than what you want to adopt as a new belief. You have faith that acting in a different way will lead you to better results. And then as you try to execute on that faith and turn that faith into belief, you are unable to because you have a deeper competing belief. Both of those things can lead to some intense psychological pain. There are probably more These are the two that came to mind for me, for sure. Yeah.
Interesting.
So you asked about, are there tiers of belief? Yes, I think there's a hierarchy of beliefs, and that largely we're not aware. Even most people are not aware of that hierarchy of beliefs because we have so many subconscious beliefs.
Even a hierarchy might be an oversimplification of it's not necessarily a stack.
Right.
Because my faith that this chair will support me when I sit on it, my belief that it will when I actively sit upon it, is very strong.
Yes.
As strong as it's maybe stronger than many beliefs that I hold to and act on. And chairs have not followed through sometimes. I think a lot of people have experienced sitting in a chair that was broken and they didn't realize it, or it broke when they sat on it. But that doesn't change my trust that the next time it will work. My belief that chairs support my weight and I can sit on them is very, very strong. But I don't live my life on that belief. It doesn't affect other parts of my life. I don't have it come in conflict. It's like it's not an important enough belief to affect my life in a very meaningful way, other than it's such a strong belief that I take it for granted, I guess. But you understand what I'm trying to differentiate here? It's like a pocket side of beliefs that you don't live your life based on, but you do act out in your life on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of interesting.
I wouldn't rank that high on a hierarchy, but my belief is very strong.
Oh, but you behave as if there's a hierarchy there. What would be a competing belief?
I wouldn't put it in the same category as what do I believe about God?
Right.
Those are very different kind of stakes. Those are very different,
but those rarely
scales of ideas. And this is a very simple belief. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Sure.
I will sit on that and it will not fall apart.
Yep.
What I believe happens to you when you die is it's more complex. It's much more factors involved. There's almost every part of your life factors into what you believe about those things. And that's a much more complex belief. So maybe that's how there's a hierarchy of importance. There's a hierarchy of how strongly do you believe those things. But then there's also a hierarchy of how complex is that belief and how integrated into your life is it. Maybe that's a fourth category, even. How integrated into your life is that? There are a lot of people who would say that they believe very strongly in God, but it doesn't really affect the way that they live their life. It's not really integrated into their life or their decision making.
Right. So they have a strong faith in God, and the belief is lagging behind from an observable perspective.
Yeah.
And this is where, if we want to go the religious route in our discussion here a little bit, this is where
I only go that way because that's
it's powerful.
A situation where belief is so important to the practice of religion.
Commonly.
Because in your definitions that we're working with here, there's a big gap between having faith in a religion and having a belief in a religion and actually living that out, submitting to the tenets of that religion, accepting the teachings of whatever religious text as superior to your own thoughts or reasoning, or that you test your thoughts and reason against what this book teaches.
Correct. And that's why I talk about family of ideas, right? Or a structure of ideas is faith. And having faith is a lot easier than having belief.
Yes.
And that also, having this clarity around, faith and belief are two vastly different things in my conception of them, again, that completely unlocked the book of James for me, right? And it also gives me...
faith without works is dead concept.
Yep. It also gives me an enormous appreciation for differences between denominations and the differences in priority between denominations. because they're using a lot of the same words to mean different things. And now that I can conceptualize all these different moving parts where they're using the same words, but meaning something separate, I can say, oh, well, what they mean is this, and that speaks to their priority on this thing. And what they mean is this, and that speaks to their priority on this thing. And now we can really have a discussion because they're prioritizing different pieces of the doctrine, the dogma, whatever, and being able to separate out system of ideas, faith, that you may not be living out perfectly or may not ever come to the point where you have to convert that faith into belief. There are lots of systems of faith that don't come into execution. Yeah. Or that execution may be very low impact and you never have a way to disprove the belief because the belief is so low impact.
That plays out in a lot of cults that we see throughout history, especially some of the more famous ones.
Oh, same
well, the Branch Davidians were the ones in Waco.
Yeah, I think that was the one.
They kind of had a mass suicide event, but they also were locked in a building and lit on fire. Jonestown is one that is often, and that one's often misunderstood because the term drinking the Kool-Aid comes from that event, but it's often ignored that they did not willingly kill themselves. They actually had practiced drinking this, like doing this drink. They had done this repeatedly and they just added poison this time. There was also something where they had guns. They weren't allowed to, it was either drink this or be shot. Like there's a lot of, so like that's an interesting thing where like, if given the option saying this is our belief, this is taking it from faith to belief.
Right.
Do you believe what Jones is saying? Drink this.
Yep.
And if you don't, we're going to point a gun at you and make you drink it anyways. Yep. But that's faith hitting where the rubber hits the road of that. Like if they really believed it, then they would have drank the Kool-Aid willingly, but they didn't.
Yep.
There was a system of faith that allowed them to live a certain way that they enjoyed, but they didn't necessarily actually believe what was being taught enough that they were willing to die for it. Because that was part of and we see that in many religions where people are willing to die for those beliefs when it comes down to it.
Right.
But a lot of times cults are appealing to emotion and just the flights of fancy of people of, oh, you're saying if I accept your teaching, I can live in this way. Well, that appeals to me. Right. I don't really care. The teachings aren't important to me as long as it gives me the ability to live the way I want to live or do what I want to do or live in this, or just live in this prescripted way that I want to without any cognitive dissonance on my part. This is wrong, or this is not how people should behave, or this is not how humans should behave towards one another, or whatever different cults all have very wildly different practices.
Yep.
But each one has its own appeal to different baser instincts or damaged people looking for things. And there are cases where the people did mass suicide, and there's cases where it is publicly a mass suicide, but maybe not everyone did go for it, and they had to force their hands. Like I said, with the Jonestown thing, that's one that's very famously misunderstood. That whole incident, that was something I wish that they had talked about more in school, by the way, because there's like a sitting U.S. senator was like murdered. Like no one talks about this stuff at all. Like this story is insane. What happened? His ties to like the political regimes in San Francisco, including like Harvey Milk and people in power, like the contributions he made to their campaigns, the favors that they did, the times that they looked the other way for things that they were doing that were illegal.
I don't think I know any of this.
Yeah, it is wild. We should have a conversation about that sometime. But I'll have to touch up on my history before we have that conversation. But it's an insane story, how all that went down. It's very like it's like mafia element. Like literally, do you don't know about the senator and all that stuff? I hadn't heard about that. So they went to Jonestown to check up on one of their constituents. Like it was this thing where like, my child is in this thing. You're the representative. Can you try and reach out to them? They went and visited the compound, saw everything. Went back to the airport to leave, and Jones thought they were suspicious or whatever it was, sent his people with guns and shot everybody as they were boarding the plane. And there's a woman who was the senator's assistant, survived. Like I read her recounting of the events and her story, and this was shortly before everyone died.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a catalyst event for what led to them being like, all right, well, now we just shot this guy and his people. We have to escape now to this other plane. Like, did Jones believe it? That's a whole nother question, but that's
yeah.
There's a lot of really interesting things in history that we did not touch on in history class, and there's a lot of boring things that we did. Mm-hmm. So I wish we spent more time on some of the more interesting elements.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's a whole nother podcast for it.
Well, yeah. So let me see here.
That would be an interesting podcast by itself. This is, like I said, we don't even have to have this in the video, but
yeah, it would be.
Everyone will have 3 or 4 people. Everyone brings a lesser known story from history that they've thoroughly researched and tell everyone in the group or whatever.
Yeah.
We can do that as a whole podcast, or we can do this a series, like 4 separate podcasts. Everyone, like next time you bring one.
That'd be fun.
It'd be really fun.
I think we should consider it. All right. Well,
I'll do a whole podcast. I'll do an hour podcast on the Battle of Midway right now with no research. I can tell you enough about it.
We almost should. Oh shoot! I just saw the time. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we have time for that. But
yeah. Okay. Well. Anyway, so when somebody is dealing with psychological pain due to beliefs not working, beliefs competing with other beliefs, and that being unknown, or some of their underlying assumptions or core values being challenged, I kind of have seen 2 ways of approaching it. And one of them is explain why the belief didn't work in this case. Like what are the reasons it didn't function? You know, what are the exceptions? What are the other moving parts, right? And then one of them is questioning your assumptions and revising your model of the world so that your faith and belief can work together and so that your thinking is more clear. That is the second option, is more painful in the short term, but leads to better outcomes. And then I would also say identifying your own dissonance is incredibly valuable, despite the pain it creates.
Well, that's why I think it would be good to do, as I was just marking down.
Yeah.
Let's do a whole podcast on what is cognitive dissonance. What does it feel like? What are the best ways to handle those feelings when you feel them?
Yeah.
How do you, like, when you recognize that is what you're in, what should you do to come to the best conclusions and best outcomes instead of taking shortcuts?
Yeah. That'd be worth doing.
Because the shortcuts are where we get into trouble.
Yeah.
That's where, this feels wrong. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to decide this is not important. I'm going to dehumanize this person rather than feel this feeling.
Yeah.
That's where it gets dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. So, identifying your own dissonance is valuable. Noticing dissonance in another person is also valuable.
Yes.
But be careful. Confronting someone on their own dissonance is often a bad idea, especially if you haven't been specifically asked to do it, because it is so painful to have your underlying beliefs challenged that people will turn on you instead of turning
as the source of that discomfort.
Correct.
You're the reason that I'm feeling this.
Yep.
It's a great way, like we just said,
killing
to
the messenger. Yep.
Force someone into a short-term, easy answer instead of reckoning with that dissonance.
Right. Exactly.
It was almost impossible to confront someone who is in dissonance or who or triggering dissonance within them by confronting them, it's almost impossible to do that in a way that will not lead to them blaming you for the way that the thing they're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So something to do with care. Anyway, this is BOACast. This has been David Destroys Luke with thoughts and belief and faith.
I didn't see any thoughts here.
I don't know any. Becoming our age is learning, laughs, relationships, and responsibility. This, to me, is a core piece of learning, is understanding how you conceptualize the world and continuing to build that out as you grow older, not stagnating, not resting on your laurels, not giving up with what you were taught in high school or college, but continuing to grow. And then taking the responsibility to identify the faiths that you want to have, whether they're religious or not, the faith system you want to introduce with your family, the faith system you want to take on your own, to turn those faiths into belief and test those beliefs in the real world. That stuff is really powerful. And then also, when you are just reacting, or you're having an emotional feeling, or your ego is challenged, don't call it thinking. Thinking is another layer. Thinking is intentional. Be intentional about thinking about the things that are important in your daily life.